Every civilization is shaped by geography. Mountains isolate people, deserts slow movement, oceans connect continents, and rivers quietly determine where wealth, industry, and power accumulate. For most of human history, the strongest nations were not necessarily the smartest or the most technologically advanced. They were simply the ones that could move goods, people, and resources more efficiently than everyone else. And in that regard, the United States inherited something extraordinary. Not gold, not oil, not even military power, water. Because beneath America's rise sits one of the greatest geographic advantages any civilization has ever possessed. A vast interconnected river network that transformed an entire continent into a single economic engine. Without it, the United States would likely have never become the world's dominant power. To understand why, we need to understand a simple truth that modern life often hides from us. Civilization runs on logistics. Everything around you, food, fuel, steel, electronics, fertilizer, machinery, depends on transportation. Economies become powerful when they can move enormous amounts of cargo cheaply and reliably. And throughout history, there has never been a cheaper way to move bulk goods than water. Even today, transporting cargo by river is dramatically more efficient than by road. A single barge can carry the equivalent of hundreds of trucks while consuming only a fraction of the fuel. The larger the water network becomes, the larger the economy around it can scale. This is why rivers have always mattered. The Nile gave birth to Egypt. The Tigris and Euphrates supported Mesopotamia. The Rhine helped industrialize Europe. The Yangtze fueled the rise of Eastern China. But no river system on earth compares to what exists inside the United States. At the center of it all lies the Mississippi River Basin. Stretching across the American interior, the Mississippi system connects together the Mississippi, Missouri, Ohio, Arkansas, Tennessee, and countless smaller rivers into one enormous navigable network. It is difficult to overstate how unusual this is. Most countries suffer from geographic fragmentation. Their rivers may be too shallow, too seasonal, interrupted by waterfalls, frozen for part of the year, or simply disconnected from major population centers. But America's waterways form something closer to a continental circulatory system. A farmer in Iowa can send grain thousands of kilometers south toward New Orleans without ever touching an ocean. Factories in the Midwest can access global trade routes from deep inside the continent. Raw materials from the interior can flow outward toward export markets with astonishing efficiency. And all of this occurs across mostly flat terrain with relatively mild weather and fertile land. The result is not merely transportation efficiency, it is integration. The Mississippi Basin turned vast distances into a connected economic space. Instead of developing as isolated regional economies, large portions of the United States evolved into a single interconnected market. And once transportation costs fall, everything begins to compound. Agriculture expands, industry scales, cities grow, trade intensifies, infrastructure becomes easier to build, population density increases. Over time, geography begins to multiply itself. This is one of the hidden reasons why the United States industrialized so successfully during the 19th and 20th centuries. The country did not just possess resources, it possessed a system for moving those resources cheaply across enormous distances. And geography rarely works alone. America's river system converges toward another enormous advantage, the Gulf of Mexico. The Gulf Coast became one of the most strategically valuable industrial regions on Earth because it sits at the intersection of inland waterways and global maritime trade. Today, this region contains some of the world's largest oil refineries, petrochemical complexes, LNG export terminals, ports, and shipping hubs. Energy from Texas, grain from the Midwest, industrial goods from the interior, all of it flows toward the Gulf, and from there into the wider global economy. This combination of navigable rivers, fertile farmland, industrial capacity, and ocean access created something few countries have ever achieved: a nearly self-contained continental economy with direct access to world trade. And this is where America's geography becomes almost unfair, because most nations must compensate for geographic weaknesses. Russia possesses enormous territory, but much of it freezes during winter and many of its ports remain geographically constrained. China has major rivers, but its geography is divided by mountains, regional fragmentation, and uneven access between north and the south. Europe contains highly productive river system, but political fragmentation historically prevented continental-scale integration. Africa contains immense natural wealth, yet many rivers are interrupted by rapids and waterfalls that limit navigability. South America faces similar barriers. The Amazon is enormous, but surrounding terrain and rainforest conditions complicate integration and development. The United States, by contrast, inherited a rare geographic balance: fertile land, temperate climate, internal waterways, two major oceans, and strategic depth. And for most of its history, it has also faced relatively weak neighbors and minimal direct external threats. This allowed America to focus less on survival and more on expansion. The country could industrialize internally before projecting power externally, and eventually that industrial base became military power. This is an important point because military dominance rarely emerges in isolation. Aircraft carriers, advanced weapons, and global influence all rest upon industrial systems beneath them. Steel production, energy, food security, logistics, manufacturing, transportation networks. Long before America became a military superpower, it became a transportation superpower. And in many ways, that transformation began on rivers. Even today, in the digital age, geography still shapes power. Data centers require electricity. Electricity requires infrastructure. Infrastructure requires resources. Resources require transportation. The systems may become more advanced, but their physical foundations never disappear. And that is why geography continues to matter. The Mississippi still carries enormous volumes of agricultural exports. The Gulf Coast still anchors American energy infrastructure. The inland waterways still quietly support industrial supply chains across the continent. Most people never think about these systems because successful infrastructure becomes invisible. When civilization functions properly, we stop noticing the foundations beneath it. But those foundations shape everything. And perhaps that is the most important lesson here. Empires rise for many reasons: technology, leadership, institutions, military power. But beneath all of those things lies geography. Geography determines which civilizations can scale, which societies can integrate, which economies can move resources efficiently enough to sustain power across generations. The United States did not simply build the world's largest economy. In many ways, it inherited the geographic foundations for one. And even now, beneath the highways, cities, and financial markets, the rivers still flow quietly underneath American power.